Not every adventure can be won with brute force and magic. Sometimes you need to be a little bit subtle, and sometimes you need to be a little bit clever to succeed instead of that brash and brazen playstyle. The Infiltration Subsystem does provide this framework for those type of events and adventures. It allows characters to rely on improvisation and quick thinking to infiltrate strongholds and organizations in order to accomplish an objective. My name is Don. I'm trying to be the Sly Strategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. An infiltration is more or less a role playing activity where the players will narrate what their actions are going to be in response to various situations around them. And it is where the players can use their creativity and problem solving skills to achieve whatever goals are necessary for this infiltration without directly confronting enemies. Matter of fact, you kind of want to stay away from enemies to keep your awareness levels down. The GM will take these actions and determine the skill rolls for the players and the difficulty classes for the obstacles that the players need to overcome. The Infiltration Subsystem provides a framework for measuring incremental success within the overall endeavor. An infiltration takes place over the course of multiple rounds, and each round represents a specific period of time that is up to the GM to determine. One round might be 10 minutes, it could be an hour, or it could be even more. It depends on the story, what the player's preferences are, how difficult the objective is, and various other things that could influence just how long this will last. So, in my mind, the Infiltration Subsystem is a bit like the Chase Subsystem, but with extra steps and a few more complications. So, I'm going to do a quick kind of TLDR, or I guess in this case, a TLDW for an infiltration. First thing you want to do is determine what your objective is. Then you need to, as a GM, develop, or as a player, overcome the obstacles. You want to escape notice by keeping your awareness points low throughout the entire encounter to keep the difficulty class low and not fail the objective. You want to avoid or overcome complications and unexpected problems, and be able to recognize opportunities that you can provide to aid the group. And if it's available, you need to prepare ahead of time in order to earn what is called edge points. And edge points can be thought of similarly to a hero point specific to this particular infiltration. It could allow you another opportunity. It can sometimes be spent to overcome an obstacle, or it may be used in a specific circumstance, such as stealing or copying a key to a locked door. So that edge might only be applicable to that locked door, but it is an edge nonetheless. So with that, let's go ahead and move into the first one, which is the objective of the infiltration. So the objective is generally going to be determined by the narrative of the story. Do the players need the secret plans of the BBEG or the big bad evil guy? Or do they need to rescue an important NPC? Or it could be something as simple as needing to get the embarrassing letter from the newspaper office for the grandma that they ran into down the street before it gets published the next day. What do you need to infiltrate? Do you need to infiltrate a massive castle or prison camp? Or maybe you just need to infiltrate the city clerk's office? Determining what the objective is will let the players know what success looks like, what preparations they might be able to make ahead of time in order to make it go smoother, and it gives them an idea as to what the difficulty of the infiltration is going to be. For the GM planning the infiltration, it'll help determine what kind and how many obstacles there needs to be. Heroes might need to overcome only one or two obstacles, maybe just a locked door, or maybe someone just needs to slide behind a counter and grab something while someone else distracts the clerk. While a more complex one might require 4, 5, 6 obstacles in order to achieve the objective. The objective can be massive or it could be small, but the infiltration rules and the subsystem is here to help you kind of get through these and provide a framework so that it makes sense in the encounter. Now, obstacles are specific challenges that the heroes face. They could be anything as simple as getting past a locked door or bribing guards, or it could be sneaking past house or office staff, or maybe even getting across a moat. But whatever obstacle you're trying to get past, they are tracked with something called infiltration points. Infiltration points represent a character's progress towards overcoming an obstacle. Each obstacle requires gaining a certain number of infiltration points to overcome, and this is typically one or two, but some challenging obstacles may require quite a few more. An obstacle can be a group obstacle, like a locked door, because once the lock is picked, all the players can go through, or an individual obstacle like walking past the open door of a break room at the right time so they're unnoticed by the people who are talking inside. Player characters can gain infiltration points in a bunch of different ways. Usually, it's going to be through using a skill at the right time in the right place or a perception check, but sometimes it can be another role or even the use of a spell or an item. We'll go ahead and bring up Guard Post here and kind of show you how these obstacles are laid out, or if you're creating them yourself, how you would want to lay them out. With a Guard Post, you can see it takes 2 infiltration points in order to bypass it. And it is an individual skill because each individual is going to have to get past that particular Guard Post, thereby overcoming 2 infiltration points. It can be overcome by using deception, diplomacy, or stealth, and the obstacle can be standard, hard, or very hard. It is kind of up to the setting and the GM to determine what would be good for this level of party, this type of infiltration, and just how aware the individuals are that you are in the area. There are a whole bunch of different obstacles out there, but they all kind of work generally the same. So let's talk a little bit about pacing the obstacles. By pacing, we mean how long you are going to spend on this infiltration. If it is a short infiltration, you would use fewer, maybe 1 or 2, and you would use lower infiltration point obstacles. If it's larger, more complex, you need to get into the big bad guy's lair, or you need to get to the center of a prison camp in order to find the one specific NPC that you are trying to find. You might need multiple obstacles, and they might be obstacles that need information, not just sneaking past something. And in order to keep this pace up and not make it seem like such a slog, bear in mind how many checks the player characters are going to need to attempt to complete their obstacles. If you have an obstacle, like a 4-character party, and you have an individual obstacle come up, each player character will need to roll separately, and it will move a lot slower, and it will be a lot harder. And the stakes for an individual failure to the group's awareness points can be super large. Where an objective with mostly low infiltration point group obstacles are going to move very quickly, it's going to keep the pace up because very few rolls are required. As soon as the group meets the amount of infiltration points needed, then that particular obstacle's over. And another thing to bring up, especially if it is a more complicated infiltration, is give the players various approaches. A very simple example is at a guard post, the players can sneak in. It can be done by using stealth, disguises, or magic. They can convince someone to let them in. It could be done by posing as someone else, offering a bribe, using charm, or maybe in their preparations, they already made a contact and made friends with this guard. And now the guard's going to be like, oh, hey, George, yeah, go ahead and come on in. So there's various approaches that could be done. They could also find a way to totally bypass security. It can involve a secret entrance, disabling the alarms, or bribing someone further down the line to let them in the back hallway. Now, regardless of the obstacles, once inside, the players will need to be careful to not draw attention to themselves. It means blending in with the crowd, avoiding doing suspicious behavior, and being on the lookout for guards that might have a heightened awareness around them. Because if they're caught, they could be attacked, arrested, or thrown out, and the infiltration is over. And this is where awareness points come in. So let's go ahead and talk about that next. Infiltrations should be done without being noticed as much as possible, and awareness points show how aware the opposition is to the player's actions, creating kind of a sense of pressure for the players and a sense of urgency in order to get this done. Unlike infiltration points, which are obstacle specific, awareness points are a single pool for the entire infiltration and for every single participant in that group. So all player characters share the same awareness points pool. Now, awareness points can increase in 3 different ways. When a player fails to overcome an obstacle, you would gain 1 awareness point or 2 awareness points if there is a critical failure. And there is a case where some failed checks might not add points as long as they have the actions left in the round to overcome it. And a good example of that would be like a picked lock. If you fail to pick the lock on your first action, well, you have 2 more actions to try again. And that will not necessarily increase the awareness points for the entire infiltration. You also gain an awareness point at the end of each and every round. And it is due to the increased risk of discovery the longer the infiltration goes on. And the last thing is that the game master can also give awareness points and add them to the pool if any of the characters do something that would increase the risk of their discovery. Let's say someone failed to pick a lock 3 times in a row and the player character says, "Oh, my player swears." Well, then that probably is going to increase your awareness points. Now, when the players reach certain thresholds, the effects of the awareness points are going to kick in at that point. The effects can be customized by the game master, and they typically involve tougher challenges as players accumulate different levels of awareness points. And depending on how you scale it, a good one would be every 5 awareness points are going to increase a level of difficulty. We'll go ahead and bring up an example here from the Gamemastery guide. And just to point out that this is a pretty basic awareness point scheme for an infiltration with a 10 infiltration point requirement. Use this as is if your infiltration needs 10 infiltration points, or you can adjust it to your game. On 5 awareness points, the suspicions are raised. You increase the DC for obstacles by 1, and the first time the player characters reach this tier, a complication occurs. 10 awareness points, the first time the player characters reach this tier, another complication occurs. 15 awareness points, increase the DCs for obstacles by a total of 2, and throw another complication their way. And at 20 awareness points, the infiltration fails. And once again, in this particular case, there were 10 infiltration points needed in total for all the obstacles. So double that would be 20, and that is where the infiltration fails. Each threshold has an effect like increased obstacle difficulty, added complications, maybe even starting a combat encounter, or some other consequences just as dire. Reaching the highest tier, that in this particular case, it was 20 awareness points, it means total failure. But the story can still continue. They still need to get done what needs to get done, but they need to do it in a different direction or do it through a different challenge. But we mentioned the word complications. So let's kind of discuss what complications are. There are times when a plan goes wrong and things seem like they can't get any worse, but then they do. And complications are this: they're unexpected problems that make a challenge even more difficult than it already was. They could happen due to critical check failures, reaching a specific number of awareness points, the GM deciding to add a little bit of excitement to the infiltration that might be going too smoothly, or just bad player choices. A good example of this is a wizard's castle might have wards triggered by different magic types used by the players. So if you were able to overcome an obstacle using one certain magic type, that particular magic type might be the one that triggers a complication in order to make something else bad happen. Complications can often increase awareness points and make the infiltration much more difficult. Guards noticing and trying to stop, capture, or harm the players is a common complication. It can lead to a brief combat encounter, which is something you really don't want, simply because of the noise and the ruckus and the attention that that could possibly get. So the players must be careful not to raise suspicions. Each round of noisy combat is going to add more awareness points unless precautions are taken or the combat is isolated. So the players could try to maybe close the door to make sure that no one can see, and it dampens the sound a little bit. They might try to knock out the guards with a spell rather than have a long, drawn-out combat in order to make it go quicker, make it go quieter. Now, for the GM, when creating a complication for your particular infiltration, determine the details. Complications have triggers. So the trigger could be as simple as reaching a certain awareness point level, or it could be when a player character does a specific thing. but it will affect either the single character or everyone in the group. Then decide if multiple players can work together or if only one can resolve that complication. Complications must be overcome before moving on to other obstacles or even continuing with the obstacle you're currently on, and resolving them will take the character's entire turn, just like overcoming an obstacle. So we'll kind of cover one that they show from the book, and that is called Do I Know You? And it is a complication. It does have a trigger. Once again, 5 awareness points is the trigger. To overcome it, you need to use deception, diplomacy, performance, or stealth, and it can be standard, hard, or very hard, depending on what type of infiltration it is. And what it basically is someone thinks they know you. You walk in and they're like, oh, I recognize you from the bar the other day. You either need to convince them otherwise before slipping away, or find a way to just avoid them entirely, like slip behind one of your player characters or walk around the corner and kind of book it so that they can't follow up with you on that. There are going to be success conditions, and just follow what the success conditions do. Usually a failure will be 1 awareness point and a critical failure will be 2 awareness points. Some complications are one-time events. In this particular case, how many times are you going to run into the same person in the same infiltration as you're moving around a particular area? So it's a one-time event and are automatically resolved. Once you get out of that area, it's kind of over. But consequences might still remain because of that. It could raise awareness points because they could go to the guard and say, hey, I thought I saw someone that wasn't supposed to be here. If a complication requires infiltration points to resolve, then it should be treated more as an obstacle rather than a complication. And what we mean by that is if a particular complication does require infiltration points in order to pass, they need to do something specific in order to pass, then you're adding an obstacle rather than a complication. It's more of a semantic argument, but it does exist. And the one thing I will say is, and the book recommends this as well, in truth, is to avoid overwhelming players with complications. Try to keep it to different awareness levels, or if they do something really not too smart, it is generally advised to have around 2 complications per awareness point threshold. Too many complications, and it distracts from what they're trying to do, and it will increase the risk of failure unnecessarily. Now, not everything is a complication. Sometimes opportunities show themselves, and we're going to go ahead and get into that next. During your infiltration, not everything is going to be a challenge, not everything is going to be an obstacle, not everything is going to be a complication. Sometimes players can use their turns to help the group in different ways, and these are called opportunities. Somewhat related to obstacles, but they don't earn infiltration points or directly affect the objective. What they do is they provide benefits, things like a magical password to disable future security measures, reducing awareness points, or making future challenges easier. Opportunities do come with risks. If you fail on an opportunity, then you can increase awareness points or lead to complications. The GM is going to be the one that determines what the available opportunities are, what happens when they fail, what happens when you succeed, and when they would occur. They can be used multiple times or only once. In that magical password one that we had before, you might be able to use that password in multiple locations, or it could only work for that one door. And another good example of this is a player might steal a guard's keys only once, but they can use those keys multiple times in multiple doors. Now, opportunities can be found in almost any infiltration, and the good example they have from the book is called Smooth the Path. And basically what this means is if it is an individual obstacle and an individual has already overcome that particular obstacle, then they can attempt to basically help other player characters pass that same obstacle, basically using follow the expert. I'm not going to get into that too much, but just wanted to show you what opportunities actually are and what they look like. The last part I want to cover is player preparation. If your players know they're going to be doing an infiltration, there are things that they can do in order to prepare for it. We're going to cover some examples here in a little bit, but things like scouting, bribing, meeting people, other activities like that that are downtime activities that gain the players what is called edge points. These points give them resources and advantages for the infiltration things like stolen uniforms and forged documents. I like to think of edge points as kind of similar to hero points. You can use them maybe for another opportunity if the GM allows it. They can sometimes be used to overcome an obstacle. Forged documents in that case could be used to bypass a guard check. Or they can only be used in a very specific circumstance, such as stealing or copying a key to a locked door. However, just like a lot of things in infiltrations, careless preparation can increase awareness points even before the infiltration starts. If you bribe the wrong guard, if you bribe the honest guard, that is going to increase the awareness points before the infiltration even happens. Usually, you're going to set a time limit on the amount of preparation time that the player characters have, only giving them a certain number of days or a certain number of activities that they can do to prevent the players from accumulating too many edge points, which is going to kind of reduce the surprise and the point of the infiltration. If you offer more opportunity for edge points, consider lowering the thresholds for complications and failure in terms of awareness points. Decide how many times the characters can benefit from each preparation activity, because in general, activities should only really provide advantages once, unless you can think of a compelling reason to give it to them more times. And here's a few examples of preparations that might give edge points. Gain contact is a good one. It's a downtime activity. If you succeed, you make a contact and you gain one edge point that might be useful later. Bribe a contact is very good as an example because it shows you what the cost is, what the requirements are, which is you successfully use gain to contact, and then various success conditions such as success, failure, and a critical failure, showing you that you can lose up to 2 awareness points, or I guess add up to 2 awareness points even before you begin the infiltration. And then scout location. Scout location once again shows you some of the things that you can do ahead of time in order to make the infiltration go a little bit smoother. Now, infiltration adventures are a lot of fun for both the players and the GM. It does require a lot of preparation work by the GM, and it is probably going to take a lot of time and effort from the player characters. But if you would like to mix up your normal weekly session or do something just a little bit different that maybe people hadn't done before, then I encourage you to try running an infiltration adventure. It allows the players to kind of exercise their creativity and problem solving skills to achieve new goals rather than just giving them the information in a 1-minute conversation with an NPC. I do hope you like this video, and I hope you like infiltration rules. If you did, feel free to like, subscribe, or hit that notification bell. But whatever you do, I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.